video looks at the 10.5 day 2 homework, and specifically I'm going to focus on problem number 1. It is multiple choice, so these are your 4 options of answers, but we're going to pretend that we don't have those and hopefully just find it in the end. Now there's not too much room here, so it'd get kind of squished if I did it on this screen, so I put it onto a Word document so I can show my work a little nicer. So again, we're on 10.5 day 2 homework worksheet, and this is the starting problem. So if I'm going to add or subtract 2 fractions, I need to make sure they have a common denominator. And specifically with what we're doing with rational expressions, you want to make sure it's the least common denominator. So 2n is like 2n over 1. We learned a couple sections ago that in order to find the LCD, we need to factor. Okay, so I would start by factoring n squared plus 3n minus 18. Could use the X box if I need to, but you should have gotten n plus 6 times n minus 3. Now when we're finding LCD, we would then make sure that we look at if anything cancels, and n minus 8 does not cancel with anything there. So I can now come up with my LCD. You do not need to write this as a separate step, but I take that first full denominator, so n plus 6 times n minus 3. And then the second denominator is just 1, so I could multiply it by 1, but I don't need to. That means that in order for me to subtract these together, I need to have 2n over 1 have this LCD, which means I need to multiply the top and bottom of that fraction by n plus 6 times n minus 3. So my first fraction is n minus 8 over n plus 6 times n minus 3. And then I have basically minus 2n times n plus 6 over n minus 3 all over n plus 6 times n minus 3. Now, one common mistake I see with students is that at this point they would cancel the n plus 6 and n minus 3 here, but you would virtually undo what you just did. So when you're adding and subtracting fractions, once you've simplified in the beginning, you don't simplify again until the very end. And if you find the least common denominator, you actually won't need to simplify the bottom. Okay, so now I can take this and subtract everything on top. So I'm going to have n minus 8 minus, and then I'm going to put it in parentheses. I'm going to start distributing these. Okay, so that becomes 2n squared plus 2 times 6 is 12n times n minus 3. And now it's all over n plus 6 times n minus 3. And now again, I have n minus 8 minus, I would need to multiply these two things together. I could FOIL, or I could use the box model, 2n squared, 12n, n minus 3. I get 2n cubed minus 6n squared, 12n squared, negative 36n. This gives me 2n cubed. These add up to 6n squared minus 36n. So that's going to come behind here, but in parentheses, 2n cubed plus 6n squared minus 36n. So there's a lot of little algebra going on here. N plus 6 times n minus 3. And then I would distribute my negative. I get n minus 8 minus 2n cubed minus 6n squared. Negative times negative is plus 36n all over n plus 6 times n minus 3. And last but not least, I would combine like terms. So I have a negative 2n cubed. That comes first. Put it in standard form. I have a minus 6n squared. And now I have a 1n plus 36n is plus 37n, and then a minus 8 all over n plus 6 times n plus 3. So I believe that's my answer. We don't need to multiply out the bottom. I would go back to my worksheet, and I do see that letter B was negative 2n cubed minus 6n squared plus 37n minus 8. Now they do have the bottom as n minus 3 times n plus 6. We had n plus 6 times n minus 3, but because of the associative property of multiplication, that order does not matter.